Hello everybody, I'm Thomas and welcome back to another video, this time doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be doing a video of some games leaving my collection. Now, obviously, really like board games, so I'm always getting some cool new games, Turing Machine, Twilight Inscription, so I only have so much room, and at some point, I gotta just get rid of some games. So I thought I'd do a video of some games I'm going to get rid of here today. So I'm going to be going over 10 games today that pretty much fall into two different groups. The first one is games that have been replaced either directly by like a sequel game or just a similar type of game that I enjoy better. The other group is just games I don't really like. Either I find boring or I just find something wrong with them. They're too long, too this or that, and there's just some reason that they're out. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so for the first game, we got The Crew Quest for Planet 9. So for those of you who don't know, The Crew is a co-op trick-taking game, and when it came out, it made a big splash, and it also made a big splash with me. This is one of my all-time favorite games. The only reason it's leaving my collection is because this game exists, and it's the sequel, and it's better in pretty much every way. They're more or less the same. This has some scaling missions, which is really nice, and I also like the different missions in this. Well, in this game, normally the missions are just get a card of this number and type in your hand, while this one has like some variable stuff like, oh, be the last person to win a trick or only win even amount of tricks. They're just really weird stuff, but I really like it. It's a lot more variable and flexible, and I think overall just better. All right, second game on the list is Codenames. Codenames is a team-based word game where you're trying to help your team you're giving them clues to try to guess words, and you're trying not to let them guess other words, and the team's trying to do the same, and it's a race to see who could do it first. This game is super popular for a reason. It's a great party game. The only reason it's leaving my collection is because Codenames Duet. This just gets to my table more often. I generally like co-op games more, and I think this is just better. Moving right along, the next game on my list is Pandemic. Pandemic is a co-op game where you're working together trying to cure diseases and save the world. This game's alright. I kind of cooled on it. I like co-op games a lot, but I find this game just okay. I'm not the biggest fan of it. Like I said, I like co-op games, and maybe, the whole pandemic situation IRL doesn't make it as fun to play. But the main reason it's also leaving is because World of Warcraft Pandemic, I think, is better in pretty much every way. I like the characters, I like the map, the cards are better, I think it's more interesting, I like the items that you get. I think in pretty much every way, I prefer the World of Warcraft version. All right, the last game leaving my collection that's being replaced is Cartographers. This one's probably the one that's being not directly replaced, but Cartographers is a flip and write game where you're surveying the land, creating a map, and trying to score the most points. This game is really chill. It's really fun if you like drawing. I have some colored pencils in here, so I always play it with that, and it's very just like a nice chill experience. My drawing skills aren't great, but it's still a good time. The main reason it's leaving my collection is because I have a lot of other roll and writes and flip and writes, and just to be honest, I'd rather play them than this. So Railroad Ink, I would rather play for a simpler one, or Twilight Inscription if I'm looking for something meaty, or maybe Hadrian's Wall also. Those are all just great options. Onto the next half of this video, I'm going to be going over some games that have just kind of cooled on. I don't really like as much anymore for one reason or another, and that are leaving my collection. So the first game we're going to be talking about is The Mind. The Mind is one of the first two games ever in my collection, so it feels kind of sad it leaving, but to be honest, it's not a game I've wanted to pull out in a while, and a game well, at this point I'm not going to because it's leaving my collection. But in The Mind, it is a co-op game where you're basically just trying to lay down cards from 1 to 100. You're trying to lay them down lowest to highest. There's numbers 1 through 100. And there's basically different levels. The level dictates how many cards each player starts with. It's a cool little game. It's one of the first in my collection because I played it at a convention, but to be honest, I find it a bit just gimmicky. And once I've played it enough, I just have no desire to play it anymore. So that's why it's gone. The next game leaving is Hanabi. Hanabi is a co-op game. If you're sensing a theme, I really like co-op games. Hanabi is a co-op game where you're trying to put on an awesome firework display. The really unique thing about this game is that you don't know what cards you have in your hand at all. You can't look at them. And then the point of the game is you're trying to give each other hints about what cards they have, and you're trying to work together to build this firework display. It's a really interesting concept, just not one I really vibe with. It's all right, but as far as co-op games, I would rather just play something like The Crew. Moving right along, the next game leaving is Sorrow. Sorrow, once again, is another early game in my collection, so it feels kind of sad for it to leave. But Tsuro is a pretty simple tile laying game where you're controlling a pawn around a map, basically just trying to live the longest. The reason it's leaving my collection, it's just I think it's a little bit too simple for my taste. I mean, it does play pretty quick, but there's not many decisions. You kind of just are moving around, and sometimes you can get some fun combos if you kind of plan ahead, but for the most part, you're just laying tiles and seeing what happens. So it's all right, just not for me. All right, so the next game on my list is Azul. Azul is an abstract tile drafting game where you're making patterns and trying to score the most points. It is by far one of the nicest games. It's probably the nicest game in my collection. Looking wise, it just has a very nice table presence. Why is it leaving then? I'm not the biggest abstract fan. And Azul, it's pretty cutthroat. I mean, you could do like hate drafting and all that, but I've played it a lot and it's not a bad game. It's just I've cooled on it, and there's other games I'd rather play in the same time frame and kind of wait than this. All right, the next game leaving my collection is Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride is a route building game where you're building routes and trying to score points and trying to cut off other people and doing all sorts of cool stuff. Why is it leaving my collection? I just don't really like it that much. I think it's an okay game for sure. I like some of the other versions better. I've played like Europe and a couple other ones. I do tend to like them better because there's just more to do with like the technologies and places you can unlock. I don't know. Just not the biggest fan of it, and it pretty much always comes back to there are just other games in my collection I'd rather be playing than this. And the final game leaving my collection is Munchkin. This also holds a special place in my heart because this is one of the first games in my collection. It is a dungeon crawling game where you're going through 10 different levels, killing monsters, collecting items, helping your friends, and also stabbing them in the back. I've heard this game described as 30 minutes of fun in 3 hours, and I would tend to agree. It goes on a bit long, it can be random with the items and monsters, and it just is a game of someone going till the very last level or second last level, and then everybody's trying to stop them and they're trying to stop them, and it's just whoever runs out of cards first wins. And it's kind of a weird, I don't like the ending of it. Dying is weird in this game where it's actually kind of good and it's confusing, and I'm just not a fan. I've really cooled on this game a lot. I just would rather play pretty much any other game in my collection. So there you go. There's 10 games leaving my collection. Obviously, I don't hate all these games. I like them a varying amount. You know, The Crew, it's a great game, but the sequel is just better, while Munchkin, I don't really like. So that's just how it goes. Let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this style video, leave a like. And until next time, I'll see you.